welcome to Last Week On. My name is Adam Straughan, and we are back covering Invincible Season 3, Episode 2. But before we jump into that, I have a very special guest. So he is the co-host of My Bloody Judy, and if you type in AZB on YouTube, you will see him and his husband Alistair. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the podcast one of my favorites, Mr. Zachary Patton-Garcia. How you doing, buddy?
Howdy, howdy. I'm excited to be here. You know what? Season three, it came so much more timely than between one and two. So I'm really happy that I've retained what went down in season two before
Mm,
covering season three because we were about to. I was sitting down to watch it today, and I was like, oh, I don't even know if I remember anything, and it all came back. So yeah, keep
nice.
the seasons coming out pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, first three episodes dropped, and then there's no break this time. We're just going straight through to the end of the season. Thank God. Because season two, man, felt like it dragged for like just months and months and months. But yeah, so obviously we've had episode one that we've covered so far. Ian and I did that one. I just want to know your thoughts on episode one, Zach. What did you think of that?
Overall, it was fun. It was a good episode. It was a good comeback episode. I think it felt a little just felt a little chaotic just because of how many characters were being thrown out there and thrown in there. I feel like we were getting a few new characters, but then we were getting so many like past characters that I was a little overwhelmed and in my mind having to track
Mm,
where we sort of were and which plot lines I should have been following. And then I was like, well, fuck. Then yeah, I don't even remember because the all the villains come in at the end and we're supposed to remember what they did. I didn't even remember their crimes. I'm like I could have pardoned them because I didn't remember anything they did. But it was a good first episode. I much preferred this one, so I'm much happy to
mm.
be on for this one.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, this is a packed episode, and I
Hmm.
mean, just shit goes down in this episode. Like, this really, like, for me, this episode dictates possibly the course of like the rest of the season. I don't know, but yeah, I really, really love this episode. I'm just throwing that out there right now. But the episode is called "A Deal with the Devil." But yeah, like, I honestly it's so nice how it bleeds into like the end of season, like the end of episode one, and then we kind of like start with a cold open. Obviously, when we go back and we see how kind of how Cecil got to where he is now. But I love when we catch up and it just continues from that point onwards, and
Hmm.
just oh shit gets real fast. But I've got some questions to ask you, which obviously will when we come to them through, I'll obviously ask you. So I'm really intrigued about like where you sit on the Mark versus Cecil point. Um, I
Oh,
think that's a really interesting
I love the
conversation.
question of it too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love the
yeah.
whole question of Mark versus Cecil. And I love the I mean even the episode title, The Deal with the Devil. Like there's this big overarching question about, to do good in the world, like how much sort of bad do you have to let in? Can you remain completely good? Me and my
Mhm.
husband right now have been going through different TV shows that we we've seen in the past, like Prison Break, Walking Dead, things like that.
Yeah.
Or we hadn't seen Walking Dead, but we're going through it now, and there's a lot of like that. The
Yeah.
deal with the devil is like how much of your morality can you hold on to in order to like you just can't go through a situation like what's happening with Invincible right now, being completely clean. It just doesn't seem possible, especially with the goal that they have to keep this planet safe.
Yeah.
They need all the I get where Cecil's coming from. They need all the firepower they can get, and I also see where Mark is coming from in that he is trying to hold up. He constantly has people telling him in his ear that, oh, you're like your dad, don't be like your dad. So why would we, and we'll get into this, why would we
Yeah.
expect that he wouldn't at full force be trying to reject that with this entire being?
Exactly that. And like, at the end of the day, like he's really, I mean, I know that there are other superheroes as well, but he's the most powerful superhero on Earth right now. So like if the Viltrumites do come down, Mark's going to be number one that has to be there ready to defend everyone, really. Yes, the other heroes can probably do some damage, but like Mark's the one who's going to do some absolute damage. But yeah,
Hmm.
like I mean, the whole point is like, they both have points, and like in episode one, I very much leaned more towards Cecil. I was like, well, he's right, like in what he's saying. Like, he's got to be ready. That's why he's training him. And like, to be fair, like Mark killed Angstrom, and yet Cecil's still working with him. And like, as he said, do you think I should have locked you up because that's what you're telling me right now? And he's like, no, 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 that's
Yeah.
different. It's like, well, is it only different because it's you? And then Cecil also says, and he says later on in this episode when he's like, oh, well, you worked alongside your dad, and like he murdered like 1,000 people, like did basically killed so many people. So
They're
like,
always trying to throw that in his face and leave my boy Mark alone. So do you lean more towards Mark then in this one?
so I kind of flip back and forth, but the only reason why I lean more towards Mark in this episode is because of Cecil implanting that thing in his brain without telling him. I think there's an ethical
Mm,
question there whether that was the right thing to do. Now I know Cecil did that because of the way Omni-Man turned out, but Cecil is working with Mark in a way that he never worked with Omni-Man. So he could have
yeah.
had that conversation with Mark. And the fact that he just did it anyway undermines a lot of what he's trying to tell Mark. So like,
Hmm.
I think there's a big ethical question hanging over that. And that's one thing where I'm like, nah, Cecil, I think you fucked up a little bit there. Like, especially the fact that you made that promise to Debbie. Like you respect Debbie's opinion on things. You don't just go over her head. Like you ask her, you go and speak to her about Oliver. You don't just go and get Oliver, like you go and speak to her about
Yeah.
Mark. So like you kind of undermining the relationship you have with her as well. So like, that's the beauty of this. Like Ian and I talked about this in episode one. The best conversations is when they're gray, right? When it's like it's not purely good, it's not purely bad. You're
Yes.
kind of somewhere in the middle because it makes sense. And both people have like a really good, strong argument. And you're like, I can see both points. And that's the best juicy, meaty stuff for me that I love.
Yeah, I can't stand when things are just like white or black. It is I do enjoy a little bit of the gray because that is just life. That's and this is life to a heightened sort of supernatural science fictiony extent, and I think that creates an even darker shade of gray. There is just no linear way to navigate a situation like this, especially with everything that just happened. Like again, the weight of what Omni Man did
Hmm.
cannot be understated. It looms real heavy over everything that is going on now. And so I understand why that would put Mark in a very specific like headspace of wanting to champion good. But then we get, and this is why I really appreciate these flashback scenes of Cecil because um I even feel like we could have had more of this. I wouldn't have minded a full Cecil flashback episode, maybe
Same.
picking back up at the end of the episode with, and
Mhm.
and then we'd have to have tacked on another episode just to have that. But so I'd get why they didn't do it. But even going in deeper to Cecil coming around to that gray and
Mhm.
understanding that things have to be gray in order
Right.
to succeed because they're humans. This is Earth. They are the weakest on the food chain in the entire galaxy as far as we've seen. So,
Mm.
it's I really am on the fence with this one between the two, between Cecil
Yeah.
and Mark. It's real hard for me.
Yeah, it's same. And again, like talking about it now, like my opinion could probably change. And the thing I love about Cecil in this episode when we get the flashback is that he's not lecturing Mark from like, an almighty high point. He has been Mark, So like when he
Hmm.
first met the director, he was like, no, no, like why are you working with these guys? They're criminals. And then the director says that line to him, about that, like, you can be the good guys or you can be the people that save the world. And then you've got to choose
Yeah.
one. And then, like, later on, obviously, Cecil says that again when he says it to Donald. But, like, when he's talking to Mark about that, and obviously, he's using the reanimate and he's using other people like Darkwing, he has been Mark in the past and he's had to learn and come around. So, in a way, in his way, he's trying to teach Mark the same thing. Now, is he doing it 100% right?
Mm.
Not necessarily, but does he have time? Absolutely fucking not. So he's got so much going on his plate that he's like, come on, we have to get to this quickly because they could come down at any point and then start a war.
I would push back on that a little bit too, though, because I do think Cecil has the time, or he has to make the time. I understand that we're kind of in dire straits right now, and the clock is ticking. But I don't think it takes much time out of what Cecil has to do to not have Mark be completely ambushed or caught off guard by being surrounded by a bunch of villains. That then Cecil pops up and says, "Actually, you're working these with these guys."
Hmm.
You could pull him into an office. You could go to his house. You could pick any little place to have a conversation with him, a quick conversation saying, "Hey, this is the course of action that we have to take. This is why. Let me explain this to you. This is what we're gonna do. And this is just how it has to be. And here, this is my reasoning why." He doesn't give Mark any of that. He only expects Mark to submit to um his plan here, and Mark has not had any time at all to process any of this, and
Mm.
then learns that Cecil has also implanted something into his brain. And so, like, how else the hell is he supposed to fucking respond, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think the lack of communication, this is with every fucking show. I hate when there's a huge lack of communication with
Yep.
characters, and like an entire little like bundle of chaos could be settled, but then I guess we don't get the drama. So, it's
Yeah, yeah. Exactly that. And like, you know, the way Cecil talks with Mark isn't always 100% right. Like when he says later on, when he's like, "Oh, you're just like your father," after like Mark's just fought 100 people, and it's like, was really that the time to make that kind of jab at Mark when
hmm
like he's already riled up anyway? So like, yeah, it is a big thing. It's always like this in TV shows where it's like this whole thing could have been avoided with like a 20-minute conversation and a cup of coffee. But obviously that wouldn't make it, like
yeah.
decent TV to watch, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, you're absolutely right on that front. But we get what we get. And like tensions are high and Cecil's obviously not going to back down. But yeah, but we'll see. We'll get into it anyway. So the episode starts. We open on a beach. There's some market stalls.
hmm
There's a shady looking character who's following some graffitied signs into a store. Obviously, this is younger Cecil Stedman. He goes in, shopkeeper greets him. She's very otherworldly. She's given Mother Earth vibes. He's like clears the store basically and pulls his gun out. It's like everybody out. He heads into the back. He then looks around. Obviously, he says Stedman on the radio. Tip, it was a bust. Tip, it was a bust. We find out why he said that later on, because obviously it looks empty. But then at the back of the store, he finds these green glowing containers, and then the shopkeeper reappears, and basically they get into a fight. She absolutely hands his ass to him. Like she just kicks seven
He
shades of
gets his
shit out of
ass
him.
kicked. He truly
Yeah.
does. And it's so jarring to see Cecil with hair too, because it looks like a toupee that he's wearing already, and we know that this is supposed to just be his hair.
Right.
But I think the flashbacks again, like I could have used a whole episode of flashbacks with Cecil, just to fill in a little bit more details, and because we're highlighting all of these things, but it would be better to see, I don't know, the stakes a little bit more. And what
Mm.
were Cecil's stakes going into a battle like this? I mean, you know that he probably had the intel of what these two glowing things. We don't even know what the hell these things are. At least filling
Exactly.
that in.
Right.
Um, he has the intel of what these things could do and how dangerous all of this is. But we don't really see the stakes in all of that as much as I would like to. But I do think it sort of touches on because sometimes I do have to be reminded that yes, I should like Cecil, because I do think Cecil as a character is deeply unlikable. Like he just doesn't his sort of presence isn't very welcoming. He just doesn't make me feel good, right? Like other characters feel so much like I see the layers when they're on screen. You don't see
Mm.
a whole bunch of layers when Cecil's on screen because he does have a job, he has a purpose, and this is what he's sticking to, right? And he doesn't
Mhm.
really deviate from that. Um, Whereas the other characters do, and they let a little bit more of their humanity show through them. And I think this is one of those times where it really helps me to remind myself that, yeah, I do like Cecil in that he is dedicated to saving the world and he
Mm.
will go into a mission like this, understanding what is going to happen, what could happen, and is 100% willing to to die for the cause if he needs to, right?
Hmm. And I agree. Like the big difference is like, with Mark, like we see Mark as Invincible and we see him as Mark. Whereas with Cecil, we see
hmm
him as just Cecil. So like outside of work, outside of the GDA and everything like that, we never see Cecil like when he goes home, like what he's up to. We never see, even
hmm
when we see younger Cecil, we never see him outside of work. Like that's always the lens that we see him through is like, this director, or at this point, he's like someone that works for the GDA. And like we never see that layer of him like when he gets to that point of, oh fuck, I've got to really step up here. Like of course he does accept the position later on, but that's still within the lens of like we're seeing him through GDA, through Cecil Mark, Cecil that we already know. But it would be nice to see him outside of that. And I suppose that's why I really like the conversations when it's just him and Debbie sitting down and chatting about like
Yeah.
Oliver, about Omniman, because that's when I feel like we see a little bit more of the humanity in Cecil. Like rather than being kind of so, and he has to be, right? He has to be kind of to the point and cutthroat, and we have to do this because we have to get shit done. But at the same time, like those moments of when he is sitting just having like a more of a human conversation with Debbie, like I eat it up because that's a different side of Cecil that
Mhm.
we get to see. So I understand what you're saying totally, and that's where like when we had the Adam Eve episode, we saw like her kind of generation of where she got up to where she was, like where she is now. Give me like a Rex episode. Like I'd love to see like his character develop as well from where he
Yeah,
was to where he is now. Like these one episode focused on people would be really interesting. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we get more seasonal flashbacks later on, but it would be really cool actually. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
so basically the shopkeeper talks all about like, there's revolutions. Like she wants to say that people are going to die, but she's like, oh, we're going to set people free. All of this like culty type talk. He then shocks her. Force Fist then appears, who I guess works with her. Looks like he breaks his ribs. Like he really punches him like right in the ribs and like he spits blood out. Like Cecil is getting the shit battered out of him right
He
now.
gets it. He's getting it. He's getting it left, right, and center.
He's getting it good. But they say that the Order of the Freeing Fist, and then backup does arrive. He kind of then Cecil reveals, saying, "Oh yeah, like what I said on the radio, that is code for come stop these two nut jobs." And then they walk over, they turn the machine on, and this gas starts to pour out of these canisters, and literally their skin just falls off them. It's like the Robbie Williams rock DJ music
Oh,
video. Like
it's
the skin is just
gnarly.
coming off them. It's wild. Obviously, Cecil runs over, slams the door shut. Some of the gas comes out and hits him, and even Cecil, like the skin and like you can see the muscle and like the bone and everything.
Yeah,
It's
they
just
go.
wild.
It feels like it's insane seeing like practical effects through animation like this, right? And it wasn't even because I noticed this scar and I was like, okay, so this will be when he gets
Mhm.
this scar, right? I did
Yeah,
not expect for every bit of skin to fall off of him, and like you see it like peeling off, sort of like peeling wallpaper, and it's
yeah.
absolutely disgusting.
I know, like I thought, like because his scar's always been like next to his mouth, like here, right? So I always thought, like, oh, like something happened where he's been badly damaged just here, not his entire body, like where like you see his hand like blister off and everything. I was like, what? And then we
It
find
was
out
very
that
like Willow removing the skin, wasn't it?
literally like them two are like bored now, but yeah. And then we find out, obviously, later on, it kind of, flashes forward. He's in hospital. He has recovered. And then they say about this, skin that they've like re-put on him, but they kept this skin, the scarred skin on him, which is the only piece of him that was left from like his OG skin, which is interesting that it's like the scarred skin. He says, oh, that's a reminder of what happened because 17 people lost their lives with that gas coming out. But the director does say to him, it could have been thousands. So what you did, Cecil, is really good. Just go home, like celebrate that you're still
Mhm.
alive and you saved thousands. But obviously, Cecil's hanging on to those 17 people. And this is like, you know, this is a reoccurring thing with all of the characters in Invincible. When like, you saw when Atom Eve lost them people in Chicago and she couldn't get the like out of her mind that she lost these people, even though she saved a lot of people. Mark, like right back in season one, like when he, tried to save that woman and her child in that crater, and then like all he had left was like her arm in his hand, and he couldn't let go of that for so long. And it's interesting. It's just how much the weight of like that hangs on
That's one of
us.
the craziest things I've ever seen in any TV show, period. But yeah, I mean, like, it's true. Like, the 17 people does have to, we have to be reminded that, right? Because within
Yeah.
superhero media, we often forget that, as they're smashing into buildings or, even just flipping a car, that somebody could be in that car. It could be one person, it could be 17 people, it could be like 2,000 people. And the 17 people, that has to weigh on it because they did save Cecil. And the same thing
Mhm.
that happened to Cecil happened to those people. So why couldn't they save those people? It just,
Yeah.
fucked, fucked.
I know it is fucked, and like that's like one of the things of like I mean I'm not a big fan of the movie Batman versus Superman, but one of the things I did like was when you saw like Batman seeing like Superman like fighting and like tearing the city apart, and people were getting hurt because of that, and that's why he had such a grudge against him. Because he was like, I'm trying to save people, and you're literally just disregarding this, smashing like buildings to pieces, and like people could be dying. I'm trying to save people, and you could see why he had that grudge. So like that made sense. I mean, the rest of the movie for me,
Yeah.
like whatever. But I like that. I like that part of it. So that yeah, it is important. It is important to remember that and to see that because as you said, Zach, like we get so hung up on a lot of superhero stuff where it's like these are the heroes, these are the gods, like everybody should look up to them. They're amazing, and yet like people die around them all the time. So it's like something to remember.
And when you think about like when major tragedies like that happen in the real world, even without superheroes, you have memorials that come up. You have walls with people's names on them, and it could be down to 20 people, right? But like you think
Mhm.
about how many lives are lost in these superhero battles. Well, I mean, if they were putting memorials up for everybody, it's just that every city block would have a memorial on it. And
Mhm.
it is I really appreciate when media um acknowledges the loss of
Yeah.
innocent, background animation.
May they rest in animation peace. But yeah, so then obviously we flash forward again. So we get where Cecil now is carrying the director. There's been some type of absolute chaos that's happened. And yeah, he's carrying him down this corridor, trying to get him to a safe room. He's like bleeding. And then an enemy appears, this giant enemy, and he runs at them. And then the Order of the Freeing Fist turn up again. So the same people that fought Cecil before, they're back. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, what the hell's going on? And
Mhm.
then the director says, "Oh yeah, like I saved them. They work for me now." And he says like they were too good to waste, so I fixed them. Obviously, Cecil hates that, and like this is
Yeah.
what we were talking about earlier when like Cecil at this point is in the point that Mark is in now when he's like, "No, like they are enemies, jail." And then after they fought off that guy and literally saved them, Cecil's like, "Oh, they should be in prison or dead." And then the director says, "Get your head out of your ass. They just saved your lives." And then Cecil, and this is like cold. And Cecil's like, "Allow me to express my gratitude," and just shoots them both in the head. And I was like,
Yeah.
fuck. And then he just says, like, "Oh,
I
I
think that
don't
is
want."
like some crazy shit that
Yeah.
he would do that, but it is the same place that Mark is in sort of right now, and it's the same place that Mark is in that he should have learned from. That like communicate with your employees a little bit, let them know that there are ex supervillains walking around, right? So that
Hmm.
everybody's not just caught off guard and firing blindly, because the only thing that Cecil had is in his mind is those past wrongdoings that those people have done and those people that they have killed. And remember, we're reminded of those 17 people. Um,
Hmm.
and Cecil has not had time to process. Oh well, these are the guys I'm working with now, and why? Let me give them a moment why to see why
Yeah.
they're valuable, what their value is, and if they can be rehabilitated. Rehabilitation is another sort of
Yes.
theme throughout this episode that I find really interesting.
Hmm. And the thing as well, though, like going back to the conversation we had, like if Cecil had just said, "Look, Mark, like I know you're pissed off, but let's sit down for a second." I had a time when I was younger, and there was like some people that came back that were villains, and then they started working for me, and I hated that. But and if you just had that conversation, like explained this experience with Mark, things might have gone a lot better. But we don't get that version. But
We
he's
like the
had this
testosterone. We
experience.
like people getting angry, right? And using their superpowers to blast through shit.
Exactly. And I mean, to be fair, like when Mark pins him against the wall, like pretty hot, not gonna
Ugh.
lie. Let's go, Mark. Do it to me. And then yes, and obviously Cecil then gives us the like, I don't work with criminals, not even if they're boom, invincible. And then it shakes, and we get the blue and grey color this time, which is cool because it's giving us that hint towards there's going to be a costume change, going to be different colors coming in. So I think that's
Mhm.
really, really cool. Did you like that's just where we sit in episode one. Like it's cool where season one we had the title card that kept getting splashed with blood. Season two it was obviously like cracking all the
Yeah.
time, and then this season it's just like the very clean, but the colors are just changing. So it's interesting like what they're doing with them. I haven't watched episode three yet, but I'm going to be intrigued to see what they do with that as well.
I haven't either, so I'm on the same page as you. I have to say, like, you just can't beat season one. All the blood was
Nah,
like absolute. It
yeah.
was just gnarly.
Literally this. And then like yeah, like by the end it was like you could barely could see Invincible. It was just covered like in blood. But it was cool. It was a very like yeah, horror movie-esque, but I loved it. But what an opener, Zach. Like
Mhm.
literally going straight in with like, oh, this is Cecil, this is the shit he went through. And then he is basically like it's showing you he has had the Mark experience right now. Um, and then we come back like to this, which I thought was really cool, which is Cecil is then being because I kind of thought that could then go from there, go back to present day, but we get a little bit more. So he's
Mhm.
escorted into prison. So he's obviously walking past all the cellmates. He's put into a cell with like this giant blue guy, and even the guards are like saying, "Oh yeah, that his last cellmate, like we took him out in a bucket." So like, good luck, slamming the door shut on him. And like, I love that Cecil's just like, "Oh hello, what's your name?" And then like literally like time goes by and then this guy is working for Cecil. Like just like that. It's like
Mhm.
it was
I hope
pretty
I hope the
funny.
blue guy comes back in this. He's
Damn.
pretty he's pretty fun.
He was cool. And then obviously the director Radcliffe, that's his name. He comes back in, walks down, he just says, "Look, Cecil, like I'm stepping down as director, and I want you to take over. Um, this has been your rehabilitation. Like I've been watching you basically. Like, you've reformed yourself. You've reformed the prison. Like, look how great this place is now compared to when you first came in. The GDA was really impressed by that. So this is your rehabilitation. So like, and he says, I don't waste talent, I fix it, which is an interesting line. And then, he offers
Mm,
Cecil the job. And Cecil's like, nope, I've got no interest. And then this is when Radcliffe says the line, which comes back later on, literally from Cecil's lips. And he says, you can be the good guy or the guy that saves the world, but you can't be both. And that's exactly what we were saying at the
yeah.
beginning, Zach.
And I think he said something else in here. Where is that? That Cecil is chosen because he can bring order to chaos, and that's
Hmm.
super interesting. And that
Yeah.
that shows another talent that he has, in that it almost speaks to what he is going to do later in doing the same thing that this director is doing, is that you have to bring the baddies in sometimes, because the numbers and the assets are far more important than sometimes having a completely straight moral compass, right? And so
Hmm.
um that chaos is there. You got to bring order to it, because it's not like you can just eradicate chaos. And I think Cecil has to. It's just so weird with Mark, because he's got to teach Mark this, right? But
Hmm.
uh, I don't know. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Sure. No, 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 sure, sure. That's what I love about this though, is that, your mind keeps flipping backwards and forwards as we're going through this. But it's good. Like the best media should do this with you. But
Yeah.
yeah, but no, it is good. And like I like that we get this line and then obviously Cecil says it later on as well too, Mark, which is really interesting. But then after this, we cut forward to the White Room. So we catch back up to where we're up to now from last episode. So Cecil's in the White Room, he's with Mark. Obviously the reanimate is around Mark. And like they're basically continuing their argument from when they last off, where they left off in the last episode. So like, and I said it, I've got in my notes, like Mark basically has Cecil's old tick. So like he says, like, look, Mark, like basically I've got these because you're scaring me right now. They're for my protection. And he says, like, oh, you threaten people who disagree with you. And then Mark says, like,
Yeah.
I'm not even doing anything. And then obviously one of the reanimate grabs Mark's arm and he says, like, oh, do you think you can shut me up? And then obviously the big fight breaks out where Mark rips them to shreds. But like, I think the tension was done really well here. Like, I love like in episode one when like Caesar's like he's just following Cecil and like we don't really know where he's going. And then when he goes into the White Room and then it's like layer upon layer upon layer of it's just getting tenser.
Hmm.
And then like obviously the big fight when it all happens here, and then Mark says like, "Oh, you're just worried like I'm gonna blow the whistle on you." And like Cecil tries to talk him down, and then Mark's like, "Oh, is that all you've got?" And he's like, "Why did you ask me that question?" And then it's like another layer of tension when like it all flicks red and there's like 1,000 of them all around him.
Cecil needs a vacation, because this is where I see this is like prime example of Cecil being just deeply unlikable. Is that he is the way he's talking to Mark, and the way he continues to talk to everybody right after this is
Mm,
very like, I'm off by five. What are you doing? Why are you causing a
mhm.
ruckus right now? Why don't you understand what I'm doing? It's like, of course he doesn't fucking understand what he's doing. See, and again, I understand where everybody is coming from, because Cecil, um, if he had let Mark in on, well, he's got this thing implanted in him. If he had let Mark in on, well, I've got these what are they called? Reanimin? I've got these
Reanimate.
reanimin because I am a little bit I am a little frightened of you. Then he's showing his cards, and that's if Mark were to ever go evil, then he knows what Cecil's got around, and so you kind of have
Mm,
to keep things a little hush sometimes. But at the same time, you can't just ambush Mark with all of this and all of these guys who are popping up. By the way, all these guys who are popping up that hurt the boyfriend of his best friend. So he's
yes.
obviously got an emotional connection there.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't he be mad about this? And then Cecil just not really giving him a whole lot. He's not really
Mhm.
giving him a whole lot. He's kind of pushing him. He taunts him. It starts pushing him a little bit more and more as the scenes go on. And it is clearly upsetting Mark. And instead of de-escalating, it seems like he is. I do think Cecil is escalating this a little
Yep.
bit more. But then again, on the flip side again, because I can never stay on one train of thought with these two, it is showing that Mark does not have control yet
Hmm.
over
Hmm.
himself, over his abilities, and his abilities are growing so rapidly and at such a great the last episode he was what, bench pressing? I don't even know what the fuck that was.
Right.
The bench pressing that thing. Um, he is a scary figure to have around,
Yeah.
especially being the son of an Omni-Man. And as much as we know Mark and we know his heart and we know that that's not who he is, in universe, you just we trusted Omni-Man already. We cannot let our guards down completely with Mark. It's just not
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah, and that's like the stance that I always come back to is like at the end of the day, like it's always like at the end of the day, I get where Cecil is
Mm,
coming from to a degree, where like, if Mark suddenly decides, and we saw like what Mark was like in season two in that alternate reality, where if Mark had gone with his dad, chaos, like the world is
mm,
basically over. So like I get where Cecil's coming from to a degree of where like Cecil is always almost like always two steps ahead, where he's got to have like a backup plan for the backup plan. So like
yeah.
I get it, right? Because Mark really is a weapon that could destroy the world. But at the same time, in this scene, in this moment, Mark's frustrated, and he's a teenager, remember? Like, above all of this, he is a teenager still. Mark's frustrated because he's not getting answers. He's trying to ask Cecil, like,
Yeah.
just explain yourself. What is going on? And
That's all you
Cecil,
gotta do, Cecil. Please.
literally, literally, just tell him. And that Cecil's
Lord
just like
Jesus.
he's just shutting him down, as you said earlier, Zach. It's like he's like, oh look, like I'm gonna get off shortly, like so just go home, like we'll talk about this later. And it's like just explain and avoid all of this. And he's like, I haven't got time for this. And he's not giving him anything. So that's why Mark's getting so frustrated. And then he's jumping to his own conclusions because you're not giving him anything to jump on. So that's like
Oh, he has
really
nothing else to
saucy.
jump on. Exactly.
No.
He's absolutely jumping to conclusions, and it rings so true that he is. What? Why wouldn't he think? Oh, well, Cecil is because he's already kind of had a distrust for Cecil anyway.
Yeah.
His mom's had a distrust for Cecil. People just don't trust Cecil. Again, he's unlikable, and so he's like, okay, well, you've obviously turned to the dark side, and I love that he goes to the Guardians and
Hmm.
like for help and is like
Yeah.
pleading with them, and he's like, listen, Cecil is gone off his rocker, he's fucking crazy, he is like is teaming up with villains, and everybody else is like, well, whoa,
Hmm.
like I like the question of all of the Guardians of like, okay, well, is Cecil going bad? Do we trust Mark? Or do we do because we do trust Mark, but we also do trust Cecil, and it's just it creates this big mind fuck for the rest of the episode that I
Yeah.
really love.
Same. Because, like, that's not just us deciding where we sit with Cecil and Mark. We see characters in the show
Mhm.
literally doing the same thing. So, like, they're having the same moral quandaries like what we're having as well, which is so interesting. And obviously, you get, obvious characters like Donald will obviously be with Cecil, like, Debbie's obviously going to support Mark.
Mhm.
But, like, to see the Guardians choose, because they're like, either way, they could be swayed. But I think it's especially when we get the divide later on as well, which is really
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, I love it. I love that shit when you see like other characters trying to decide along with you which way would I go. But yeah, it's so good. It's so good. But yeah, so obviously, Mark fights all of the reanimates. And then, and Mark even says the line, "Yeah, will people change?" which I thought was really interesting. Um, and anyway, he charges. Obviously, Cecil pulls out that controller that he's got and like blasts like the thing inside of Mark's head. So like that's he actually says like, oh, when you fought, if you remember Zach in season two, and I think you and I covered this episode when Mark
Mhm.
went down like into the ocean and like he
Yeah.
married off to that creature and it was like doing that sonar type blast like out of its head like, and it like kept knocking him back. And then they obviously learned from that fight, and Cecil, basically capitalized on that weapon because he saw, oh, Mark can't fight against that. I will use that as a weapon against Mark, which is crazy. But
Like such a violation as well to have something
yes,
implanted into your body that you don't get to choose. But also, again, it gets so complicated because if this were a real person in our universe, I would want certain checks on a person like that too.
yeah,
His father destroyed an entire city so effortlessly, so easy that we need any type of defenses that we can against people with these sorts of abilities.
yeah,
And so it makes it really hard. But then my heart just feels for Mark. I'm like,
Sam,
damn, Cecil, because when he said
Sam.
what it was, I was like, fuck, that's cold. That is
Hmm.
cold.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like what you've said there is why I understand why the Guardians lean more with Mark, and it's like my head leans with Cecil, but my heart leans with Mark. And I think
Hmm.
like the reason why is like we see Mark as like this teenager, like this lovable guy who's just trying to do his best, and like, he's got his friends and he's like so likable and so approachable. Cecil is a badge, and that's it. He's
Yeah.
authority. So it's hard to see like to latch onto anything like that when it's basically like headmaster telling you what to do. Whereas Mark is so
Yeah.
likable. So like that's the thing. That's what I mean. Like my head, I can understand where Cecil's coming from, but I just fucking love Mark. Do you know what I mean? So that's where
And
it tears you apart.
we have seen Mark go through it. He is he
Mm.
there's not an episode that goes by, it seems now, that he's not all bruised up and bloodied, getting
Yep.
stabbed in the chest, getting his face shoved through the subway system. It's just he's always getting real fucked up here. And it just hurts us to now see that he has even this person that he's supposed to be working with or working for, however you want to put it, has
Mm.
now violated himself and his trust and implanted something into him, taken that advantage and really betrayed his trust with that. And I don't like seeing Mark get hurt. I don't like them being able to have a button that turns on some sonar thing that is going to like shred him from the inside out. It hurts me to watch that.
Yeah, because like they're not treating Mark the way that he deserves to be treated, which is like, with like love and respect. He's like basically treating him as a weapon,
Mhm.
and like it's a violation. That's exactly the word. And that's what I said earlier about like the ethical questions of like, should Cecil have done that? I mean, fucking hell no. Like, that's
Yeah.
something which you have to have a conversation with somebody like about anything to do with that. You're not just going to, take ownership of, I'm going to put this in his brain while he's knocked out in hospital because you never know, I might need to use it.
Yeah.
Fuck that. That's a huge violation. You're not above that, Cecil. But
But if
yeah,
I am
it's.
Cecil, I am doing it. That's the
But
thing
at the
is
same
like,
time,
as Cecil, I think I would do it as and this is where we get to the gray. Oh, see, all the
yeah,
themes just
this is
like
it.
it's like a wonderful stew of all of it because it is that gray area where it's like it is not morally right to do
Mm,
that to somebody without their knowledge. It is a huge violation, invasion of privacy. Um, but it is a necessary sort of guard that
yep.
Cecil needs to take, and I would do it. I would
Hmm.
do that as well. Um, Now I don't know that it needed to be used right now. I think
Yeah.
that was a step too far, and I think that I don't know. Do you think that he was doing it truly as a defense for himself, or do you think he wanted Mark to know that he had that sort of power over him,
I
and
think it was a
he was
power
waiting for
move.
a moment?
It's a power move,
Mhm.
100%. Yeah, like, at the end of the day, like, physically in a fist fight, like, Cecil's obviously got nothing against Mark. But if
Mhm.
there's any ounce of when he can have any type of power over Mark, he's going to use it. It's a power move, like
Mhm.
he's
Yeah.
tried to do it his way of like I've been training Mark, like I've getting him up to this level, like and Mark's like the best he's ever been at this point, right? Like he's
Mhm.
everything's improved by like 300% or something crazy like that. But it is a power move, and Cecil has to do that. But going back to the point you said earlier, Zach, about him like saying you would absolutely do that because that's what has to be done. It goes back to that quote: "You can be the good guy or the guy that saves the world, but you can't be both." And that's Cecil literally
Exactly.
doing that, literally doing that. So yeah, so obviously Mark's disgusted in him when he says that, and he's like, "I can't believe you put a weapon inside of me and didn't tell me. You said I'm not my father." Obviously he flies off. Cecil tracks him, basically trying to knock him out of the sky, still by blasting Mark. Like Mark's head must be like ready to explode at this point. Like it's insane. But then, this next scene, I love it. So we cut to the Guardians HQ. So they're all gutted that Dr. Seismic beat them like this. He was in season one. He was such a shit enemy, and then like they're all like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he like got the best of us." Monster Girl is basically taking the piss out of Rex on being shirtless, and I love like Rex here when he's like, "I'm going to take your constructive criticism and just ignore it." And then when the crash comes through and Mark comes, he's like, "Holy shit!" Fucking love Rex so much. But and then I love this like it's just tension. It's just so like this one little small moment, bam, all that shit's over. And he's like, Rudy,
Yeah.
like, get this thing out of my head right now. And he's like trying to explain, like, he's saying like he's working with former murderers, like before Cecil turns up, we have to do something. And like and everyone's just like, whoa, what the fuck? And like, Cecil basically comes in, he's like, everyone just shut up and keeps blasting Mark. And like that's the thing. Like when the Guardians see that, whatever Mark's just said and whatever Cecil's trying to say, they're seeing their friend being pinned to the ground and hurt. So at
Yeah.
this point, they're like, what, is Mark gone bad? Like, what the fuck is Cecil doing? Oh my God, what do I do? And I love this for that.
Nobody's talking. Nobody's
Yeah.
talking. Nobody's communicating. I mean, and I guess there's like no moment here for it. But like what we do see from Mark, he does prove time and time again that he is not willing to go to the place that his father went to. So like later, in like a minute or so, when he has Cecil pinned up, all he's doing is
Mhm.
threatening him. He's
Yeah.
not trying to kill him. He's not trying to like do any serious damage. And he does stop himself. He does have that restraint. So that should also be acknowledged, right? But yeah, with the Guardians, I never find those the strongest parts of the episode. Sometimes I do find myself that's where I like will pull up my phone or something like that. I think this is the very
Mm.
first episode where anytime the Guardians are all together talking about everything that's going on here, I that's absolutely the strongest parts of the episode for me. I think it's it's
Hmm.
it's brilliant and everybody splintering off and getting divided over this whole question because I think it's Monster Girl who asked the question later or somebody else.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But they could do that to us. What if they did that to us?
Yeah.
And oh, I'm like, my brain exploded. I'm like, whoa, they fucking could.
And you're so right because, like, who's to say that they all don't have something implanted in their heads that they don't know about, and like, there's another question there straight away, and it's like, because Cecil doesn't give you anything like that, you will never
Hmm.
know that. So it's hard to have that discussion. But yeah, so obviously, Rudy does Robot manages to block the signal. Mark obviously goes on a punching spree. Like they all start fighting basically, but start killing the reanimate around him. I love that Rex throws the explosive like at Cecil's hand and like blasts it and knocks the thing. But then like
When the
Robot's
hell
like,
did Rex become such a lovable character, too?
I
It's,
know,
it's
I know.
truly, truly, and all of these characters, I love seeing them back markup like this. This is
Yeah,
this
same.
this was gold to me. I loved them all like getting. You don't have to explain too much, Mark. We're gonna fucking have
Mhm.
your back, right? And when they see
Yep.
when they see Cecil doing the sonar thing, they're like horrified. So then immediately they're like, oh, we're going to protect our boy here. And
Hmm.
I just love the team aspect of all that.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, it kind of builds on like, episode one when I think it's Samson talking about like, oh, like, it's the family back together, and like, for all that they're colleagues, right? Like, they're all like thrusted to work together, and they all work for Cecil,
Mhm.
but they've taken the time to get to know each other, to talk to each other, to hang out. Like, I love the friendship that Mark and Rex have now, and like we see all of these little friendships starting to occur.
Yeah.
I'm still not really bothered about the Ruddy and Monster Girl relationship. I'm not going to lie, but I do love to see like the friendship starting to blossom between them, and that's the cool stuff. And that's why they're like, no, fuck no, we've got Mark's back here because we know Mark. Mark is one of us,
Yeah.
but they don't see Cecil as one of them, and that's why they're like, no, fuck no,
Yeah.
we're going to defend our boy. Um,
It's
so
it's a
anyway,
cool like little mirrored moment of that very first like the pilot episode too, right? Because
yeah,
like that same room gets so bloodied and all of the
hmm
guardians die. That has to be going through all of their heads
hmm
as this is all going down. And they're like, well, that's not going to be us. We're not about to be a bunch of dead bodies
yeah,
laying all over this floor. And the scene ends the same way that one did, where it's bloody as shit in there, right? Like it looks like it was just a war zone because it is, and it was a really cool sort of moment to see everybody team up, and it was really cool. I think like I don't I see I keep wanting to call it effects. Do we call it effects? Is it the animation effects? All of the animation of all of the fighting is like it's just cool shit. Like this is why
yeah,
I watch this show. It's
hmm
seeing them really kick ass together and
hmm
take down these cyborg things, and I don't know, the whole it all came together so perfectly for me.
Yeah, it really did. It was really well done. So then, like, all of this happens, and then Cecil's like, you're a hypocrite, waltzing off to help your mass murdering dad, which he's right to a degree, but not the time to say that shit. Not the time to say that, Cecil. Like,
He
wow.
picks and chooses when he wants to throw that up to Mark too. And I'm
Yep.
getting a little over it and I
Yep.
understand why he's doing it. I think it's having the opposite effect of what he's wanting it to have. I think he's wanting it to
Absolutely.
like sort of mind Mark of the human part of him so that Mark like tempers himself and calms himself down. And I think it's having the opposite effect where it's like riling Mark up more because now you're
Exactly.
taunting him and you're doing it
Yeah.
too often
hmm
and too frequently,
Yeah.
mm.
And it's a power struggle here between them, right? And all the other Guardians are watching this. So like Cecil really does think he has the upper hand. And and he's like, he thinks I'm going to throw these shit lines at Mark because I'm going to teach him, I'm going to tell him what's for. I'm going
Mm.
to tell him he's going to back down. So then that's why I love when Cecil's like, don't ever threaten me again. And then he tries to just go into normal work mode, and then Mark just blasts forward and pins him against the wall. And I
Yeah.
fucking loved it. Plus, it was very sexy from Mark, but I fucking loved it. I loved it just because he's like,
I do
no,
think
Cecil,
I wonder if Cecil does rile Mark up a little bit extra sometimes to
to test him.
well, to test him, and I think he's trying to gather more intel. I think he's doing it as there's a much more covert way or
Mm,
reason for him doing all of this. And I think maybe even the lack of, now that I'm talking about it, the lack of communication could be a tactic for Cecil to learn more about Mark and his impulses, and
mm,
test his impulsiveness, test how he reacts to certain situations, because he does need to know every single thing he needs to know about Mark. So not only can he come up with a sonar thing to do, but he can come up with other defenses too that he'll need to. But
mm.
it's the dick measuring competition. Don't
Yeah,
ever do this to me
threaten me
again or whatever.
again.
And then Mark
Yeah.
getting, yeah, I'm scared shitless of Mark. Don't do that, because he could rip you in half if he wanted to, and then Cecil is done.
I mean, literally, and then like when you see like when he takes his hand off Cecil and he falls down, like he has like his neck is like bright red from where Mark's
Mm,
been like had a hold of him, and like he could have just. You remember like when Anissa like flew down and she put her hand on
yeah,
Amber's shoulder? You remember when she was like, "I could snap her neck before you jump over the table." It's like that type of
crazy.
thing. Like in 1 second, Cecil's gone. It's wild. But
I would have
anyway,
just like pulled like a strip of his fake skin off. I'd have been
just give me that. But
you got to
yeah, and
humble
then
the man a little bit.
I know, right? Yeah, so obviously he loosens his grip. He says like he's never working for him again. He says stay. He threatens him. He says if you come anywhere near me or my family again, I will kill you. And it's again it goes back to what you said, Zach, where like he didn't kill him though. If this was Omni-Man, dead. So like you know he is not his father. He threatened him, but he certainly didn't kill him. You know. And like he can't throw that back in Mark's face because he spared him.
Yeah.
He threatened him and said, "Look, back the fuck off. I'm out." That's essentially what Mark was saying. Obviously, he goes with Rudy to go and get the chip removed. And I love as well, like the silence just lingers at the end here. And then Rex is just like,
Mm,
oh, fuck. Like, because everything has just
yeah.
changed now. The whole, like, everything, the working, like, relationship they all have between each other, the atmosphere, they're all like, what the fuck is going on? This was our headquarters where we all got on and came back together to discuss, like, tactics and whatever. And now all this has fucking happened. It's just all completely changed, but I love it.
At the worst possible time as well. This is the time where we need to be united and really training and preparing for this inevitable Viltrumite
Yep.
invasion. And so that's what makes me think that this is sort of like a pre-planned thing from Cecil anyway, because Cecil's way too smart
Yeah.
to know that it wouldn't go down like this, and like all
Mm.
of these reactions and how it would fracture the group, and
Mm.
how it would make people distrust him. And he was
Right.
way too casual about it when he was telling everybody, and so maybe I'm giving the writers too much credit, I don't know, but I think it feels a little intentional to me, and it feels like
Mm.
it's going to come back full circle.
I wouldn't be surprised if it did, and I kind of hope it does because, like, as I said before, like Cecil is tends to be 2 steps ahead of everything. So, like, I'm
Hmm.
hoping that this kind of comes back round and it's something else that develops from this. But man, just the tension though of like, where we go with this great divide between the pair of them. It's like this is the juicy gray stuff that I love in media, and this does it so damn well. So as I say, we go back to the Grayson household. Obviously, as I said before, like we know that Debbie's going to be siding with Mark, and obviously Oliver is as well. She's clearly pissed, and rightfully so. I mean, Mark is like looks like shit again. Is like beat up to hell, and she's sick of seeing her son come back home looking like this. And that's why she says, like, he promised that he would protect you, Mark, and like protect you. And look at the state of you. And then this, he's got a weapon in your head. She's a right to be fucked off with him.
Yeah. Do you think so? I have a theory that Oliver is going to be that side of what Mark could have turned into. So like that
Mm,
alternate version of Mark. I
mm,
think Mark and Oliver are going to go head to head at some point. I think Oliver's going to be a baddie in his own right and sort of realize his power. And it goes along with this scene where
yeah.
Oliver's very quick to be like, actually, bitch, Let's kill the
Yeah.
motherfucker. And Debbie's like, no, we don't murder. And Oliver says, why? If it
Yeah.
just like snuffs out the problem, why don't we just do it? And I
Mhm.
think that's gonna come back a little bit later. Did y'all talk about that at all? Because I thought in the first episode, because I thought that when I was watching the first episode and seeing how powerful and how quickly
Mm.
he was gaining his powers.
So we didn't know, but it's a note that I've got here actually, because like this is like revealing that essentially. So
Hmm.
I love this, and I think we are going to get like some type of scene where Mark has to face off against Oliver. Like he doesn't want to, but he kind of has to. And again, it goes back to that you can be the good guy or you can do the thing that's right, you know? So I think he's going to
Yeah.
learn that lesson with his own family at some point. You got to remember, like Mark at the end of the day is half Viltrumite, half human. So he's got that more like moral compass, especially from Debbie. And although Debbie has obviously tried to imbue that with Oliver, Oliver's half Thraxan and half Viltrumite. So he
Yeah.
hasn't got that. He's got a different type of morality, whatever it is with them two. And I mean, the Viltrumites have got what, -70? Whereas like the Thraxans, I don't know.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting, like he doesn't get that at all. It's like almost like, oh, killing's bad. What? Like I don't get it. It's something that has to be done here. So and he's got that younger
Hmm.
mind, and we learn earlier on, especially in episode one, he learns stuff so fast, and like his mind
Yeah.
is so far ahead of like the age that he looks, right? So yeah, I think there's going to be Mark's going to have a lot in his hands when it comes to Oliver, like becoming more of a superhero. It's going to
I'm
be
excited to see that because I think like a brother
yeah,
versus brother sort of showdown could be
yeah.
really fucking cool.
And like, will Omni-Man come in and like, will he do something to stop it? I
Oh
don't know.
God, Omniman, stay in space. We're still mad at you here, okay?
Just bring Alan, send Alan back. You stay where you are.
Please.
um, yeah, so obviously, yeah, we get that where like Debbie says, like, we don't kill in this family ever. And like Oliver kind of nods, but I don't know whether he understands. But he obviously offers his help. And Debbie even says, like, look, we want you to be a normal kid first, Oliver. Like, don't rush into this life. Like, Mark got to be a teenager and everything. I mean, he still is, but he got to live like a younger life before he got his powers. You're not at that point. You've got your
Yeah.
powers, but enjoy this freedom while you've got it.
And imagine sort of like as you get older, you have that. I mean, it's something that Mark is even experiencing now as a 19-year-old. It doesn't really go away for quite a while, but like an impulsiveness that you have with youth, right? Like
Mm,
you're not quick to think about consequences. You're not quick to think about like scenarios and A to B, and you give power like the age that Mark got his powers, it was a little bit more manageable because he
yeah.
was, sort of like reaching the end of his teen years. But giving a child powers who doesn't have that sort of like, well, this is right, this is wrong, this is what I should do, this is not what I should do, this is the consequence of doing this action. He doesn't have that yet. And so
Mhm.
it's like being handed $20 million when you're 10 years old, right? Like
Mhm.
you're going to reach 20, those $10 million, those 20, whatever, however many $1 million are not going to be there anymore, right?
Nah,
Because you're not mature enough to handle something like that. He's not mature enough to handle these powers, and he's going to get like drunk with power.
exactly. Yeah. And
So
as we know, like he's willing to lie at any point. Like in episode one, like he was lying to Debbie when he was going to sneak out and help Mark, and like Debbie
mhm.
obviously had that conversation with him and tried to get through to him at that point, but is he going to lie again? Who
Yeah,
knows? Now he's been given the golden ticket here deliberately. I mean, we don't even know the extent of all of his powers yet. We've seen him fly. We know he's got a really good memory and everything, but who knows what else he could do? So, like,
yeah.
yeah, like if he gets the opportunity, he's going to jump all over that as a kid would. We obviously get the even Marker talking on the roof. Um, Eve is annoyed at Cecil as well, obviously. Like she says, and this is the thing what we were talking about. She's like, but I know you, Mark. And I know that you wouldn't do that because I've taken the time to get to know you that way. So she's like, I know you. I would if she was in that room, she would have defended Mark as well, easily. But then Mark does say, oh,
Mm.
he was right about one thing, like, me killing Angstrom. And then Eve is supportive of Marky, which I actually really like. Like I really like the beginning of this, like we're building up to their relationship together. But yeah. And then Mark even says, like, I'm so pleased that you're here with me. And then Eve said, like, look, she's there to help. She was there to help Debbie against like Cecil if he turned up, but she's also worried about Mark. And
Mhm.
then, Mark clarifies, he said everything wrong in asking her out in episode one, which was hilarious. Um, and Eve was mortified more than anything else. She was like, I was mortified that I was like that lovesick over somebody for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Like you brought that up. Like that was wild.
What do you
Um,
think of Mark and Eve? Are you team Mark and Eve?
yeah, I like them together.
Mm.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense. Do you know?
I'm not sold yet. I'm not against it though. Like I just did
Mm.
not like Amber. I didn't like Amber. I couldn't stand Amber. I couldn't stand Mark and Amber together. And now I'm just kind of like, ah, do I even care about Eva Mark? So what does that say? Because he has to have somebody.
And the person that Mark should have should be William and Rick. They should be in a three-way relationship together. Give me that season. That would be everything.
Absolutely. Did you notice the amount of ass shots in this episode?
Yeah, yeah. This show is for the gays and for everybody else, but I love it. Um,
Absolutely.
no, I mean, and Mark is like super cute as well, let's be real.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I love that he does admit his feelings for her, but he says like as well, like I liked you from the moment we met, and those feelings never really went away. I just had to like, put them over here for a second because you were with Rex and everything else was going on. And obviously Eve thinks that it's a high school crush and like she needs to think about it and she flies off. But she says like I'll always have you back. Yeah, you know what? I do like them together. Like, and I think it's because they get the thing is like Amber and Mark, like the thing I really found annoying about Amber to start with is that, when she was like, oh, well, of course I knew that you were a superhero, but yet you were still being shitty with him. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
if you knew he was a superhero, then you would understand that, like, there
Yeah.
will be times when he has to, leave a date or he has to, like, leave quickly, or there'll be times when he can't turn up at all. So you understand that, but yet you're still using that against him and being shitty against him. Like, he clearly is
Yeah.
into you, you know? So, like,
I
that side of Amber I really didn't like.
even Mark, I think, are more evenly yoked.
Hmm.
I like the idea of him with another super a lot more because
Yeah.
it's not even just that he is a superhero off to save the world. He's a superhero in training, which
Yeah.
requires extra motivation and time. So
Mhm.
another superhero in training. I mean, and Eve's been doing it longer, but
Yeah.
she can understand him a lot more.
Exactly. And like, as I say, like it's not like when Mark goes off to be invincible, like, he has to leave her, Eve's right there next to him. So like they're
Mhm.
together like for all of it, which is,
Yeah.
it just works better in the relationship. So then we go back to the Guardians HQ very quickly. It's what you said, Zach, actually, the parallel of like episode one of when all the original Guardians of the Globe were like killed in that room, and they are literally mopping up the mess, like of all of this. And like Shrinking Ray's got that trauma from like seeing this because last time we saw her like with Rex, she like basically was digested and like, you know, nearly killed herself. And like there was blood all over that room and Rex nearly
Yeah.
died as well. They're talking about being weapons to Cecil. And then, Samson and the Immortal and Kate. This is like when the divide starts, right? When like they're kind of saying, like, look, where do you sit with this? And like Samson, the Immortal and Kate are with Cecil clearly. And then, in this debate, obviously Monster Girl starts defending Mark. And this is what, I had actually written down here, like, where do you land on this? But I think it is something where we've already said, like, it's so easy to make a case for each person, like, to go either way. But my heart will always go with Mark, like it always will. But my
Yeah.
head understands where Cecil is coming from for the most part.
Yeah, totally. And I understand where everybody else is coming from too, and that
Yeah,
they are also very afraid now and very distrustful of Cecil and the entire agency behind him. And it would honestly, it would feel like a stupid move for them to stick around and
yeah,
wait on what Cecil could do to them, or it could be a you know it could even be a stupid move for Cecil to have them stick around because there is that even if they decided to stay, there's that distrust now, right?
yeah.
So like
Mhm.
somebody has to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like Samson obviously tries to like smooth the situation over and he even says like, oh, like Rudy, I know that you're following Monster Girl because you have feelings for her or whatever. But he's trying to like smooth the whole situation over and say, no, no, like let's talk, let's calm down. And obviously the Immortal and Rex go like head to head, like in their argument, which but yeah, but like to be fair, like the Immortal I think is right here when he says like, look, let them go because they'll probably come back
Yeah.
anyway. Give them time. Give them time just to go away and have a
And
think.
he's been around, so he knows how this
Yeah.
thing goes. Him and his own guardians probably had a lot of dust ups. They probably split a couple times. There's no way
Yeah,
like the other ones aren't coming back. But it is real fun seeing Rex go toe to toe with them because the Immortal would rip you in half, Rex. But I
exactly.
love Rex. Rex Lug really gets my heart. So I
Yeah,
like I like seeing him buck up a little bit.
yeah.
Have
I
that
love
have
that
that bravery.
I love this. I love that you team Rex now because I fucking love Rex. Like I really do. And like from season one, Rex, who like I was like, ah, whatever, to like
Yeah.
now, like in season two, when it looked like he was gonna die, I was like, fuck no, we can't lose Rex. And then I just love him in this season. Like I really do. But yeah, Team Rex all the way now. So then we go from obviously all of this, so they kind of go their separate ways. We then go to Rick, William, and Mark. Do you know who voices Rick, by the way, Zach?
I don't. Who is it?
It is Luke McFarlane
Is
from
it really?
Thrones. Yeah,
Huh.
there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
found
yeah.
out that he dated Wentworth Miller from Prison Break. Super stupid fact, but now that's in my head is that Luke McFarlane dated Wentworth Miller.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
cool.
interesting.
I didn't know that.
This
That's
was a
really
cute
awesome.
little scene between the three of them
Yeah,
too, and I like him going to his gay besties for a
yeah.
little comfort and support.
Give me an episode of just the three of them sitting having like cosmos, just like putting the world to right. Like
Yes.
honestly, talking about like the shit that they love to watch on TV. Like, give me that, please. I'd watch the shit out of that. But yeah, this is a cute like scene. I love that like William and Rick are like always the support that Mark needs, like outside of being heroes when he just wants to like chill with his buddies. Like he's
Hmm.
known William since he was like what, really young. Um,
Yeah.
and then I love that Rick says that line, like, the world doesn't need people like that. The world needs more people like Invincible. And I really
Hmm.
like that line. He's kind of reassuring Mark that like you're good. Like you are a good guy. Like we need
You are
more
a good
people like
guy.
you.
You're not like your dad. You
Yep.
are the way you are is correct. And I think that because you have Cecil on the other hand saying the opposite, or
Yeah.
what he says is seeming like the opposite. And I really love the differing opinions that are coming in here and everybody,
Yep.
because then this leads to Rick, and it's understandable after Rick has been through his ordeal, that he would be leaning more towards the light and saying, hey, being good is the way to go. Having that
Yeah.
moral compass is the way to go, right? Like, this is the path you should be on. So if that's the path that you're saying you should be on, and you're upset with Cecil about, going over
Mhm.
to the dark side a little bit, then that's correct.
Mhm.
Whereas like I don't necessarily agree with that, but I love that Rick offers that to
Yeah.
him, and that
Mhm.
it's just a differing perspective.
And that's it. It's exactly what you've said because Rick recognizes in that moment that that's what Mark needs to hear. That's what Mark needs,
Hmm.
So like he's doing it out of comfort more than anything else. And he knows like, he knows Mark now. He knows him pretty well. So like he has a right to say that. Whereas like when Cecil is spitting like facts at him, like yes, they are facts, but they are dressed as like just shitty comments like towards him. And like he knows Mark as well, but he kind of knows Mark more as a weapon that he's trying to tame. Whereas Rick and William know Mark as the person. So like, yeah, it's these different like opinions that are coming out about Mark, and all of them have different varying degrees of like how much, fact that they are.
Hmm.
But no, it's cool. It's what Mark needed in that moment. So I like that he goes to his emotional gear support. Um, we get a quick little scene where we go back to the Guardians HQ. We obviously see Monster Girl and Rudy are like, whatever, getting closer. I'm really not bothered about their relationship.
Don't
I'm not
care.
really
Yeah,
asked.
pass.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Samson says that he'll miss Rudy, whatever. But I do like Debbie in the diner with
I
Paul. Like,
do.
yes, I
Debbie
love
deserves
this.
it. Debbie deserves,
Yes.
right? Last season we had Debbie walking away from the bar barefoot, and now we got her eating. What were they eating? Were they eating spaghetti?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
Love
Yes.
this for her. And he's
Ah,
cute.
he is as well. And I love like this is the same guy from season two. And like she even makes a point when she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I wasn't ready at that point to like do anything." And like I like as well this, like he just seems like a nice guy who is
Hmm.
interested in Debbie. So like when he notices that like her head's kind of she's not fully like she's thinking about something else, she's obviously like really, just her mind is everywhere. And straight away he's like, "Oh, how's Mark?" And he's like, and he's
Hmm.
talking to her about stuff that she can then open up about. And he's just been a nice guy with her. Like I
Yeah.
really like him. I really love this. And Debbie deserves it after everything she's
Yeah.
been through. No, so it was cute. And I want to see more dates of them two together as well, because Debbie deserves it.
I do as well.
Um, we get a quick flash of Eve mentioned before that she wants to take up some college. I forgot to mention that. She wants to do college outside of being a superhero. So she's in architecture class because, she built a tree house and then decides to do
Hmm.
architecture. She gives a pen to some late girl, so she's doing her thing. Um, we go back to the Guardians HQ. They're talking to Cecil. Basically saying that we'll have yes, they've walked out. We'll get the reanimate back up and train him. We'll do some tryouts as well. And he's like, oh, and also here's Darkwing. And he's like,
Hmm.
straight away, like Invincible wouldn't accept him, but will they? And like obviously the Immortal, like at first is a little bit hesitant because he's like, this guy, was doing shit, like shit was going down with him. But then he shakes his hand, and obviously I think it's what you
Yeah.
said, Zach, earlier. It's like Mark obviously is still a teenager who's doing this for the first time. The Immortal has been doing this for hundreds of years. So like I think he's a bit more wise into the fact of, right, okay, like let's just get on with it.
Yeah. And I think I wonder if Cecil sort of creating all of this chaos, because again, I'll go back to what they said what the director said at the beginning when Cecil was in
Yep.
jail is that you bring order to chaos. And I
Yeah.
have to imagine that this is a way for him to bring order to chaos, right? If he had brought Darkwing in at this moment with the rest of them there, I don't know that the rest of them would have been super receptive to it. And then you don't really he's got to build out his team little by little. So the ones that
Hmm.
will accept Darkwing, he's got with him right now.
Yeah.
And he kind of anticipates 2 steps ahead that the
Hmm.
other ones are going to come back. And so what the other ones are going to have to see is Darkwing fighting alongside these guys,
Yes.
doing
Yeah.
these missions, and they're going to see that from the peripheral.
Hmm.
And that will make them trust him a little bit more.
Hmm. Yeah,
As
that's a
long as
great
everything
point.
goes right and he's not murdering people.
Not putting like a black dome over the top of the city again. But yeah, that's a great point, actually. That's a really good point, Zach. Like, they will see that he is fighting alongside the Guardians, and that is more, that's the visual evidence that you need to see to be proven of something rather than just hearing it from the
Yeah.
horse's mouth. Like, because Cecil has said a lot of shit. He's obviously stirred a lot of shit up with Mark right now. So Cecil's word right now at this point doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence, but to see it in action makes a lot more sense, right? So that's a really good point, actually. And actually, like Donald even checks in on Cecil about the whole like Darkwing thing, and like Cecil even says like bad guys reform, good guys forget what they're fighting for. It's just how it works. And I thought that was a really
Yeah.
interesting line from him as well. We then get another flashback. So Cecil now he's taken the director's job. We see him meeting Donald for the first time and like the rest of the team. The team's been a bit shitty about him, like they're like laughing and sniggering about him behind his back, which whatever, like you get that. Um, but I do like this when we see the meeting between Cecil and Omniman for the first time. I thought that was pretty cool.
Hmm.
So like, he sees Omniman on the screen, he's fighting this giant creature, and like he obviously takes the chopper over to go and meet Omniman. Omniman obviously lies to his face. He says like, "Oh, my government's like sent me here to protect the people of Earth." And like, even back like at HQ when they're watching the footage back of them talking, like, I love like Donald's
Yeah.
like saying like all signs of him are showing that he's lying. And like if he was human, we'd be able to say he's lying, but we don't know anything about this alien. And like Cecil straight away is like, well, duh. Like, of course he's lying to me, but let's just keep tabs on him straight away to figure out why he's really here. And that's the type of shit that Cecil should be doing as director, right? Like, this
Yeah.
really powerful aliens come down to Earth. We don't know anything about it or its strength or capabilities. Whatever it says to us about this, take it with a pinch of salt. We need to work this out for ourselves. That's the right thing he
Mm.
should be doing as director.
Yeah. I really liked this part. I kind of wish, how we got the Adam even it was how long was that? Like an hour? It was just an episode, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was an
It
episode. Yeah.
wasn't like movie length.
No, no,
I
no.
wish we could get one for like an in between season flashback episode
Yeah.
for Omni-Man coming, meeting Debbie, like
Hmm.
all of the build
Yeah.
on all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that would be really cool, like to see like Debbie fall pregnant with Mark and like
Yeah.
how things were on Earth before then, see the original Guardians, how things were conflicting between him, like them and Omni-Man, all of that.
It would pare down all of because the show seems very very busy right now,
Hmm.
which does worry me that I'm gonna get lost in trying to keep my eye here, there, and everywhere.
Hmm.
And I feel like an episode like that would really pare it down. We would get a lot of Cecil's motivations and background.
Yeah.
We'd focus on Omni-Man and his meeting Debbie, and really that's it. We don't need like much else from that, and it would be a
Yeah.
nice like focused episode.
And it would be cool to see like how that relationship between the three of them was back then compared to how it
Hmm.
is now. So like to see like was it working better back then? Like because obviously Debbie hates Cecil right now and like does not trust
Yeah.
him. Was there ever a time when she did? And like it would be
Yeah, give us more
interesting.
reasons, right? Like
Yeah.
let us into that and see us build it. And how did Debbie react to this whole world? Was she like Amber, where she wasn't giving him a whole lot of allowances, or was she,
Right.
pretty understanding? I don't
Mm.
know. It'd be a really interesting episode, but like
I would love
I
that.
liked seeing the flash of this because it shows me that I don't know, I'd love more flashback scenes at least.
Yeah, definitely. I hope we do get more as well, just to see that like the other time compared to the way it is now, which it's better doing it this way compared to like when we had the alternate realities and the multiverses in season two, which
Mhm.
it's oversaturated like a multiverse thing when we see how things could be. But it's so nice to go back in history and see how things were in the present timeline. So give me that. I
Yeah.
eat that shit up, you know? Um, so anyway, we see that. We flash back to present day. Donald asks about Invincible, and then Cecil again repeats the old director's words to him, which, we can be the good guys, or we can be the guys that save the world. We can't be both. And that's like Cecil basically cementing he learned that lesson, So he,
Yeah.
he was Mark at one point, but now he's learned that lesson, and that really shows with his actions. Yeah, so then we get like the little credit scene, which obviously after the credits straight away, we get this other scene, which, is very sweet. A sweet way to end an episode, which has been so heavy
Yeah.
on like the brutality. So like Eve flies to meet Mark on a bridge, and then Mark confesses, he says, like, I really like you, but our friendship isn't enough. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like when I was about to die and I thought I was going to die when that thing was pounding in my head, like you were all I thought about. And like, that's him basically confirming that like this isn't a crush, like his feelings for her are real and they've been there for a long time. And like that's him
Yeah.
kind of reassuring Eve, like, I am into you. Um, and I think
And
that's kind of
again,
it.
I just don't know how I feel about them, but I am
Mm,
more open to following them
yeah.
as a super couple
Mm.
more than I was, I didn't care about Mark and Amber from the beginning. So I'm excited to see where this goes, but
Yeah.
also excited to see the fractured Guardians tenfold,
Mm.
more.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. But I think it's a nice way to end this episode with this, where we needed something light
mhm.
because, like, right now, like, it's so nice where everybody else is torn apart, but these two out of all of this are coming together. And I think that's a nice way to round off this episode where there's all of this division, dividing, but these are two people who are finally agreeing to come together. And I
Yeah.
think it's a nice way to round off that episode.
I hope
Then,
he's
yeah,
also actually, because I do believe he probably has those feelings for her, but I hope that they
yeah,
are as deep as he's trying to make them out to be, rather than him in a little bit of like a crisis mode for himself, trying to get some sort
mm,
of normal
mhm,
reality while also getting to like to marry his normal reality to his superhero, and she would be the one to do it with, right? Because she's the
yeah,
superhero and he can have a girlfriend at the same time, right?
right.
So I hope she's not getting used because the future came from something.
Exactly. Yeah, you know what? Exactly. You're exactly right. Like, I hope that this isn't just Mark like reacting out of like, oh my God, I need something nice in my life right now. So I'm going to really push this side. Like, because that's not fair to Eve. Like, they need to both come on this on equal grounds. And, she says, like, all right, let's give it a go. Let's see how this goes. And, I think as us, like, we want to see how it goes. Like, I hope it goes well for them both, and I hope like they somehow make it work. But yeah, there's a lot more potential in them both being superheroes and making this work compared to like as you
Yeah,
said with Amber, it was just a countdown timer to when it was going to fail. You know.
I
But
agree.
yeah, so then they kiss and then it ends. So Zach, overall thoughts of the episode, and then give me your rating out of 10.
Loved this episode so much more than the first. I thought it was a really great episode. The questions that it brought up and the having the audience think about, because you have to put yourself. I love want to put myself in the position of whoever I'm watching on screen, and which decisions would you make in these positions if you were Cecil? What decisions are you making? Would you implant something in him as a safeguard, or are you, you know, what decisions would you make as Mark? I love shit like that. So
Yeah.
this episode is I'm way too quick to give like tens out of tens. I'm not super, uh, uh, I don't think it threw too much. So we'll go with like an 8 out of 10. You know,
Nice. I've got
bring it
8.5 out
down a
of
little.
10. I got
Okay.
8.5 out of 10. I really love this episode because, like, so I'm watching this fresh. So, as obviously, Zach and I had a conversation before this where, like, not jumping ahead of just going into, like, episode by episode. But this for me was like, oh, like, this is a really interesting way to take the show because, as I say, we've got a clear divide here now. And this episode for me, in many ways, is like the springboard for dictating how the rest of the season's going to be. So like I am super pumped to see like where this divide goes. Like, are we going to get like, where two teams have to come like against each other? Are they going to eventually work it out? Like, eventually when the
Mhm.
Viltrumites come down, how's that going to look like, And like it just raises so many questions. But I do love that, all of the moral questions that it does raise. Like, Cecil is doing these things. he's going about them in a pretty shitty way with Mark, but ultimately, is he doing the right thing? And most of the
Mm.
time, yeah, he is. He's doing his job. He's not there to be Mr. Nice Guy. He's there to protect the world, whatever way that means. Is he bringing on like, enemies that were enemies before, but they've got powers that would be really useful to help defend the Earth? Sure, he's going to do that because that's his job. So it always comes back to that. But at the same time, like, Mark as a teenager, Mark has a right because Mark's, privacy and everything was violated by having this thing put inside of him. He has a right to be
Yeah.
fucked off about it. So it's the best type of media, this one, it makes you question, what would you do? And it's conversations like this that I love, Zach, what you and I have just had, where it's like,
Yeah.
what would you do? Or what would you do? The best media makes those conversations happen like after the episode's ended. And this is an example of that. It's just brilliant. So yeah, this for me is
Yeah.
like top tier superhero stuff by far. Like I love this
I
shit.
agree. I hope they keep on this track because they always usually knock it out of the park. I think they do really really well with the writing, obviously the animation,
Yeah.
but like keeping a story kind of moving along.
Yeah.
They don't really. I guess they don't even have the episode count to really pause too often. But
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited to see where the rest of the season goes.
Sweet, I love that. So am I. I'm super pumped for it now. I love this. But yeah, probably similar to what you're seeing. You said you're watching The Walking Dead again recently, and that is Robert Kirkman again, same writer. So
Yeah.
you can see a lot of the similarities
And
in his
Steven,
writing
the
there.
voice of the voice
Yes,
of Invincible, yeah, or
Glenn in The
Glenn.
Walking Dead. Yeah. Poor
Did you watch
Glenn.
that?
Yes. Oh my
Okay.
God,
Did how
yes.
far did you get through it? Were you one of those people who stopped because it's a long
Yeah.
show. It's like
Yeah. So I got up to like I got pretty far, but I got up to like
okay.
where so Negan had come into it and
Yeah.
then so I'd watched a lot of that and I think we started to hear about what are they called like the Whispers or something like that or like
The
when
Whisperers, I
Alpha
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That was just starting to be mentioned and then that's where I lost off. So I do want to go back though, but I think I'm going to start from the
Yeah.
beginning and just go back through because I love it so
Absolutely. We'll
much.
have to have a further conversation about that later.
That's going to happen 100%. When we start our own podcast called The Walking Dead and we just go through every episode.
Listen, I thought about it too. I was like, could I fit another podcast in? Which is an absolute no. It's an absolute no on that. But I came up with the name and I was like, oh, The Watching Dead would be so cool. And it's already a podcast, so that
Oh,
killed those
shit.
dreams. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Well, we'll have to
Yeah.
come up with something else, but maybe we're going to do like, now we're going to go in, do a 2 hour essay each on disease and abracadabra. We're going to dive into that. Come and watch our TED Talk on Lady Gaga, because that needs to
I
happen.
love it.
All right,
I
Zach,
love
tell
it. I hope
everybody
Abracadabra like appears in this show.
it's going to be like the backing music for this whole episode. Okay, Zach, tell everybody where they can find you.
If you search me, Zachary Patton-Garcia on the internet, I'll pop up if you search AZB. And then I have a horror podcast that I do with my buddy Ian Carlos Crawford, who's also covering the Invincible episodes. And yeah, that's it for right now.
All right, there you go. So go and check out everything that Zach's going on. If you check out My Bloody Judy, type in Evil Dead episode. You might see somebody that you recognize on that episode. Yeah. But
There
yes,
you go.
go and check out all of that. If you want to follow the podcast, obviously it is Last Week on Pod on all social media. Just type that in, you'll see everything on there. If you want to follow me, I am at Straughan87 on all social media. So again, just type that in, you'll find my face. Make sure you give us a rating. Give us a 5-star rating or don't bother. I'm joking. But yeah, just give us like some nice comments on there as well. On Spotify, you can leave comments as well, which can be read, which is really cool now. So yeah, leave us a little note on there, which would be really cool. Your thoughts on Invincible so far. But Zach, thanks again for jumping on with this. This was incredible. So cool to go through this with you. And I'll talk to you again about Invincible very, very soon.
Perfect.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.